Chapter 92. Versus Holy Knights Part 3. Ranga was running through the battlefield. His body was light as if it were a feather. The feeling of being upon the earth gradually began to fade, and before he knew it, his body was already running in the sky. Indeed, the acquisition of the skill was a skill that could only be attained by one who belonged to some of the highest ranks of magical beast. However, such things were no more than unimportant matters to Ranga right now. The wave of strength he now projected gave him a certain feeling of delight. His body was now overflowing with power, as if his very energy was exciting. His limbs, now covered with a jet-black fur, now had golden lightning pulsing through them. Demonic energy was leaking out like an electrical discharge. A large golden horn now grew on his forehead. On the left and right was the unchanged jet-black horns from his earlier form. The golden horn in the center was discharging rays of crystallized energy, pure energy it gave off continuously. As he gave off the poise of a king. A majestic beast of noble presence that demanded the respect of his domain. The jet-black fur, that covered his majestic body, was clad in lightning. The deep black color, akin to darkness itself, was clad in a near divine radiance that wavered delicately in the wind. However, in contrast to the gentle look he possessed, the speed that he achieved while soaring in the sky had long since passed the speed of sound. But, only within Ranga's surroundings, the airspace retained its utter calmness as if nothing could disturb it. A space-based barrier that he used consciously. As Ranga vigorously soared through the sky, he caught sight of a group of holy knights positioned below him. Using Thought Link, he had already confirmed that there was no one else currently headed to that direction. Creating a sharp nosedive, all the while killing his great momentum, he made his rapid advance towards the Holy Knights group. The Holy Knights squad commander Fritz steadily made progress on the necessary preparations. All according to Lady Hinata's plan. So far, there was not a single error in her judgment. There was nothing suspicious and, therefore, no problems whenever she took the lead. This time was no different. Although, he was still taking precautions, since it was never a bad idea to be careful. It's only a group of monsters. Even though these same monsters had proclaimed themselves to be a country, there was no need to take this as a major event. This was Fritz's opinion on the matter. However, Hinata had no use for the opinion of someone only at his level. It was only something normal to follow and make Lady Hinata's opinion his own, as she was someone that he adored. It was for that reason that he made the various preparations, so that as soon as the signal from the other groups came through, his group would also be able to immediately begin. It was possible to invoke the barrier at any time. Then disaster itself came crashing from the sky. Fritz had never neglected his guard. He felt that the need for such an excessive strategy was exaggerating the threat of the situation, but he was still faithful and trusted Lady Hinata's orders. For this reason alone, it can be safely said that he and his companions were bursting to the rim with self-confidence. Not a single one of his companions were careless or slacked in their duties. Despite all of this, a single black lump came crashing from the sky to blow away one of his companions, a mighty holy knight. Even with that, there was no reason to be careless. This instantaneous event that sent a holy knight flying was not cause for panic. The proof for this reasoning was that the holy knight who had been blown away was still certainly alive. Of course, it would be a whole other story if he weren't. But since he was still alive, there was no need for excessive thoughts. Fritz gave his first order like lightning and took actions to carry it out. They had already erected the anti-magic barrier that covered not only every direction in the sky, but also underground, so they were sure their safety was certain. It was a standard defensive plan in case of surprise attack, to sense and defend against magical attacks. Furthermore, they also had set up the spirit barrier, a complex network of barriers that held several functions such as regulating temperatures or detoxifying airborne toxins. Holding faithfully on the standard plan of actions taught by Lady Hinata herself, Fritz had the farthest barriers established to detect the enemy so they would be able to conduct counterattacks immediately in the chance of a surprise attack. But, this was all in vain, for the enemy's attack this time was simply too fast. When the barrier perceived the attack and sent the warning about the intruding monster, a holy knight had already been blown away. The extent of the barrier was nearly 2 kilometers from their position. To think that something could reach them before they had enough time to react was extraordinary. The purpose was to be able to detect the threat and react with long-distance attacks to weaken the target. This was standard procedure. Certainly, it won't react if an ally were to pass through it or touch it. Only when a monster that wasn't recognized by the barrier's settings. But it was certain that this monster had passed through these high-class barriers. The evidence of such was due to the very moment it arrived. At that very moment of its arrival, that monster had carelessly crashed into the outermost barriers, and in that instant, all of those high-class barriers were obliterated. There were some that had assumed that if there was enough energy involved, there was nothing that could pass through or resist a barrier. It was because these barriers were spread out at this very moment that the holy knight that was attacked was spared near certain death. This was what emphasized the point that barriers aren't useless things. However, to be capable of breaking through several barriers and obliterating them instantly, besides using a spirit armament, there was simply nothing that should be capable of doing such a thing. The monster that had suddenly crash-landed, using the holy knight as his landing pad, had begun walking calmly in advance to the holy knight it had blown away. Fritz's eyes opened widely as his gaze locked onto the monster in his presence. All he could do was to wait for an opening. His aim was to wait for the right opportunity to rescue his companion somehow. However, this large, black wolf emitted such a terrifying density of pressure. Fritz couldn't find any opening at all. This was the same monster that cleared 2 kilometers faster than a holy knight could react to. This same monster was now within mere meters of them. Its limbs were clad with golden lightning and possessed a magnificent horn that none of them had ever seen before. A holy knight who was armed with spirit arms and was covered in their spiritual power from the beginning, and surrounded with various barriers, had been injured from just one hit. Just the mentioning of this alone could be called a tremendous, yet shocking action. Fritz wanted to reject it from his core, but he had to come to the conclusion that the monster in his presence was an obvious disaster-class monster. Now it is no longer a situation to be worried about fallen companions. A single error would surely end with the entire group's complete eradication. All hands, battle formation. Abandon the barrier. Strike it with your full power. Like this, Fritz screamed out his battle order with frightening precision. Lady Hinata's prediction once again was proven to be completely accurate. When he made this realization, even in a situation that could be called a crisis, he felt a certain joy. As expected from Lady Hinata-sama, she had foreseen this situation from the beginning. On Fritz's face sprouted a small smile, of course without abandoning his guard towards the might monster in his presence. Like this, he continued to instruct the battle formation using eye movements and minor gestures. A skilled holy knight, without overlooking a single gesture, were capable of promptly assuming the battle formation to eliminate the demon. The members of Fritz's group immediately recovered their composure with the help of one of the party's magic, thought acceleration. As they rapidly made out their battle preparations, they continued to observe the target before them, then something unthinkable broke the tension of the battle. Ranga asked, "What are you doing?" "Quickly now, go and heal that injured person." Using its forelimb, the demon wolf tossed the blown-away holy knight over to their formation. For a moment, Fritz's composure was confused. He had already made his resolve to abandon injured or slain companions, but this monster had just given the wounded holy knight right to them instead of finishing him off. It was an action that Fritz couldn't understand. "Quickly now, if you don't do something pretty quick, he might die, you know." The demon wolf, clad in majestic golden lightning, seemed to have concern for his companion's life for some reason and had spoken these words. His deep, baritone voice was very terrifying. "Vice Commander Rama requires treatment, everyone else, follow me." Fritz quickly returned to reality and let out his voice to give orders to the other group members. Kicking the ground in order to force his body that was still confused, into action. Even though he had no idea as to what the aim of this disturbing monster was, he could at least fight without worry. Putting all of his strength into his elemental sword, he offered his prayer to the divine spirit. The energy in the atmosphere began to cloak around the sword blade and the sword itself began to emit with light. Wrapped in the spirit's ambience, the whole sword began to emit a pale light. I don't know what you're trying to do, but don't you dare underestimate us, you monster. Eat this, dispersal sword. I offer you my prayer. Please seize the enemy with your divine might. Earth jail. Oh, the blazing flame prison, burn my enemy into nothingness. Hellfire. Oh, chilling ice and snow, clad my enemy in your mighty snowstorm and freeze them. Icy blizzard. Oh, blowing wind that passes through all things, become my blade. Wind blade. The other vice commander, Gerard, held his breath as he watched the synchronized attacks of the other holy knights. He stood back to protect and aid his recovering companion. While filled with the resolve to not become a burden, he continued to observe the demon wolf situation. It was then that he was amazed beyond his capability for reason. The demon wolf, before his own two eyes, had received all of the attacks, all the while wiggling its tail happily. Fritz's dispersal sword can cut through anything and everything. From the tip of the sword, the divine protection of 4 attribute spirits was combined with an intense fighting spirit, the edge releasing the full accumulated power of each. It was a special sword technique intended for a long-ranged attack. Though it couldn't be compared with Arnaud's, Fritz could certainly use the skill, because he was loved by the spirits. Since the structure was fairly simple, it was difficult to predict the energy released from the attack just by observing the technique's execution. It was an attack that simply wouldn't give any chance for evasion, and could cut through any cornered enemy. The demon wolf, however, didn't attempt to do anything and just received the attacks, then extinguished them all with a flick of its jet black fur. Something beyond what any of them could imagine occurring before now. Fritz's special attack had also been reinforced with the earth attributes which increased the gravitational force in the targeted place. The purpose of such magic was to inhibit the monster from moving, though, since the monster had no intention of moving in the first place, such efforts were worthless. To completely burn the cut body, and to prevent the enemy from regenerating, hellfire magic was used. But there wasn't a chance that such flames could burn this monster's fur. The blizzard was to stop the enemy from dodging, and the wind blade was prepared to attack if an attempt to escape was made. Every move was completely ineffective from even damaging a single follicle of its fur. There were no words to describe this spectacle other than one. Terrifying. Even if this monster stood as an elite or A+ ranked monster, to come out unharmed by such a string of coordinated attacks could only be said to be something close to impossible. You damned monster. The other holy knights could only exclaim their utter disbelief. Even their vice-commander Gerard held the same opinion. The demon wolf continued to stand where it had been, calmly just as if it had not received an attack at all. What the hell are you? Even for the elite demons of the Fang Wolf race, such a unique monster. No beast such as you shouldn't ever exist. Fritz could no longer endure and had begun shouting. As one of the commanders of the Holy Knight Squadron, Fritz has extensive battle experience against various groups of monsters. In his youth, he had fought against many elites from the Fang Wolf race. However, this demon wolf before his very eyes was bizarre no matter how you could describe it. Clearly, it had enough power to make it parallel to a demon lord. Such a creature, was it originally a guardian deity that was enshrined in this area? Or perhaps, was it an unrecognized demon beast king who spread calamity in its wake? Nevertheless, neither he, nor any of the other holy knights knew the answer either. The group who put the protection of the entire world on their shoulders were astonished. Little humans, my name is Ranga. This noble and mighty name was granted upon me by the great and wise Rimuru-sama. For the likes of you, I will permit the uttering of this name as a true blessing. Be thankful. I am a member of the Star Wolf race. I, however, am unique. I am Ranga, the Fenrir Star Nova Demon Wolf King Ranga. I am the one who shall crush and defeat all of Rimuru-sama's opponents. The monster stated it while facing Fritz and his compatriots, all in its deep baritone voice. What it had just said was clearly a threat. A being that gave death to anyone who would oppose it. Without even being able to wipe away his now gushing sweat, Fritz was frozen where he stood. thinking about his current state as calmly as he was capable. To defeat this monster, there was no other option than to weaken it with the sealing power of the holy field. Though, to even enclose this monster, who claims such an overwhelming speed, it was not going to be a simple matter. After all, if everyone were to set out alone to accomplish such a thing, this beast Ranga would basically wipe them out one by one. Since the very beginning of this engagement, they had already been in checkmate. Desperately, Fritz shaken his mind, trying to find some way to turn the tables on this overwhelming being. Even with the supporting magic of thought acceleration, to find such a method as to allow them to defeat such a foe could not be found. No matter how long one were to look for it. Certainly not in such a dire situation as this one. However, his eyes were stunned by a blinding flash followed immediately by a thunderous roar that sounded from behind his position. The vice commander, Gerard, had attempted to make a slight movement. This, however, was instantly responded to with a blast of plasma. It was exactly aimed at the ground near Gerard's feet, causing him to immediately stop moving. In any case, Fritz wasn't sure of just how high the temperature of such an attack was, but the ground near Gerard's feet was melted and turned to glass. The heated air created a pulse of boiling hot air, as well as causing serious mental strain. As such, Gerard stopped moving foolishly. Even if they were the mighty holy knights, up until now they had never confronted such a powerful monster such as this one. Their once overflowing confidence had now been shattered. Despair wreaked havoc on the minds of Fritz's group. Even if they had their mighty spirit equipment as protection, there was no way to resist an attack equivalent to that bolt of plasma, which was capable of turning the ground into glass. Moreover, to even evade an attack which was similar to lightning, even an expert holy knight would not be capable of such things. The protective barrier and spirit equipment was the subject of their unwavering trust. They were certain there were no foes within the monster city capable of resisting such mighty existences. Even if they had to meet their deaths here, they could not afford to surrender to this monster. Sorry, you guys weren't lucky. It seems we ended up getting the most troublesome fellow here. Fritz's words were mixed with resignation. Commander, I suppose we'll just have to hope next time we'll be luckier. That's right. Besides, we always end up receiving the short straws. So what does it matter? We'll just manage this one and return back just as always. Each of the holy knights began cracking jokes. To each of them, they already understood a clear fact. Not one of them were getting out of this alive. Even so, for the sake of their honor, their pride as a holy knight, they would certainly slay it. All right, you cocky fellows. If we make it out of this, I'm giving you guys to drink for a whole month. It's an order, everyone. Let's make it out of here alive. Let's go. Fritz screamed out, and began to run with the full resolution to throw his life away. Those who had been taken out early on had finally been rejuvenated. Along with Fritz, the other 7 holy knights began to advance simultaneously. Just like in training, no, even more than that. Their movements far exceeded their norm, born out of the fear to not fall short for the sake of their comrades. They brought forth the strength they had never had before. In perfect clarity of mind and spirit, they executed a complex maneuver with ease. With this, the holy knights performed their desperate assault on Ranga at once. Then, darkness came. Feeling his realization faintly return, a sense of pain began to shoot through his entire body. A groan was let out and Fritz woke up. To even think of fainting with the sheer level of pain he was experiencing was difficult. However, wait a minute? I'm conscious? So, I'm still alive? But, if I'm here, wasn't I defeated? Immediately after collecting his senses, Fritz began to take in his surroundings. Thereupon noticing a windstorm whirling with such strength to be similar to a tornado that was carving the earth with its might. He was certainly glad to be alive. Just as he thought this, he thought of his companions. While conveying a silent prayer that they was still alive, he began to search for any signs of them. In his vision, he came across his defeated companions. They were all dispersed around as if they had been struck by the winds.
Fritz made an effort to get up, but there was no strength within his body. So, He somehow used all the energy he had to crawl and close the distance between the nearest people. That person was Vice Commander Lama, who was luckily also still alive. Filled with a bottomless joy, Fritz had already forgotten about the intense pain he was experiencing. Like that, just as Fritz had confirmed the survival of each of his compatriots, a certain voice announced the ushering of true despair. "Humans, we shall continue our match after you have made your recovery. I am yet contented with our fight after my great rebirth. Look upon me here, I have brought full potion. I do believe these will be more than enough. Now then, hurry and recover, shall we enjoy this more?" It said with such a cheerful tone as its tail wiggled back and forth happily. Like a demon. No, this demon wolf spoke words just as if he were a demon himself. Hearing those words, Fritz's consciousness was consumed by a great and unending depression. It may have been more fortunate if I had just collapsed earlier. Fritz's mind became more and more despairing as he thought on his situation. Of course, such a happy ending to his story would not happen now.